You ever wake up in a strange land, colors too bright, smiles too wide, everybody singing, nobody sleeping? Yeah, welcome to Oz, sweetheart. Where the road is yellow, the rules are invisible, and the system runs like clockwork. Follow the yellow brick road, straight to the MGM wellness kit. That's right. Why deal with exhaustion, hunger, or inconvenient human limits when you could just adjust the settings? Inside every kit, ruby red uppers, so you can dance all day, hit your mark, and smile like nothing inside you's cracking. Emerald City sleepers, because when the lights go out, you don't rest, you shut down. Scarecrow strong coffee, no brain? No problem, we'll keep you moving anyway. Tin Man Slim Sticks suppress appetite, suppress emotion, keep that figure exactly where the studio wants it. And for those emotional moments, we got you covered. Introducing There's No Place Like Control Conditioning Program. Just tap your heels 3 times and repeat after us. I'm fine. I'm grateful. I'll do another take. See? You're already feeling better. And don't worry about supervision. Our friendly Oz-approved handlers are always nearby, watching, guiding, making sure you stay right on script. Side effects may include trembling hands, sleepless nights, forgetting who you were before all this, and a lifelong inability to stop performing, even when nobody's watching. But hey, somewhere over the rainbow, there's always another paycheck. So don't wait. Step into the fantasy, stay on the road, take the pills. Because here in Oz, you don't need a heart, you don't need a brain, you don't even need courage. You just need to be useful. MGM Wellness Kit. We don't fix the problem, we keep the show going. Pizzaverse Studios. If it looks like magic, somebody paid for it.
Judy Garland, Hollywood, MGM, and the Child They Consumed. A Pizzaverse Studios documentary. A Palermo Productions original. Written by Bambi Palermo. Narrated by Vincent DiPrio. Judy Garland's smile lit up movie screens across the world. It looked effortless, pure, untouched. A voice like heartbreak wrapped in velvet, a face built to reassure a wounded nation, a child star transformed into America's sweetheart under the shimmering lights of Metro-Goldwyn-Mayer. The public saw magic. The public saw ruby slippers, laughter, innocence, and songs that felt like promises. But behind that smile was a machine. And that machine did not merely pressure Judy Garland. It consumed her. This is the story of what happened when a corporation took custody of a fatherless child, renamed her, reshaped her, starved her, drugged her, surveilled her, and built a fortune from the sound of her suffering. It is the story of how the studio system at MGM, under Louis B. Mayer, and the executives who called themselves family, turned a teenage girl into a tightly managed industrial product, then discarded her when the machinery finally broke down. This is not just a tragedy about fame. It is a story about captivity, about systemic abuse, about psychological conditioning, about pills handed out like payroll, about a young body forced to operate at a chemical redline until it collapsed, and about an entertainment empire that sold innocence to the public while quietly engineering destruction behind the gates. Because Judy Garland did not simply die from pressure. She was built inside a prison so total that even after the gates opened, the prison remained inside her. Frances Gumm enters the factory. In September 1935, a 13-year-old girl named Frances Gumm walked into MGM. She did not walk into a creative sanctuary. She did not walk into a place built to nurture talent. She entered an industrial machine, a myth factory, a sovereign state disguised as a movie studio. And the first thing the factory did was rename her. Frances Gumm became Judy Garland. That act matters, because it wasn't just branding. It was the first cut in the separation between the child and the product. Frances was a vulnerable teenager, fatherless, insecure, eager to please, and desperate for approval. Judy Garland was something else. Judy Garland was a marketable asset, a symbol, a thing to be manufactured, regulated, and sold. Louis B. Mayer saw that immediately. According to biographers and historians, Mayer exerted extraordinary personal control over Judy's life from the beginning. He and the studio executives criticized her looks, her body, her size, the shape of her face, the very architecture of her existence. Surrounded by glamorous blonde stars held up as the preferred ideal, Judy was made to feel deficient, ugly, and replaceable. That was not an accident. It was conditioning. If you can make a young performer feel ugly enough, frightened enough, and grateful enough, you make them obedient. You make them believe the machine is the only thing standing between them and oblivion. That is how ownership begins. The studio pharmacy. The studio did not respond to Judy Garland's exhaustion with rest. It responded with chemistry. This is one of the darkest truths in the entire story. MGM did not simply overwork a teenager and hope she could keep up. It built a medical regimen around the extraction of her performance. Historical accounts describe a tightly controlled cycle of stimulants and sedatives administered not as emergency intervention but as standard operating procedure. Uppers to wake her up, downers to shut her down, black coffee to sharpen the edge, another dose when the body began resisting. This was not fringe behavior, it was institutional practice. And it didn't stop with pills. Her food was also controlled. Her body was policed like inventory. Extreme calorie restrictions became part of her daily life, with accounts describing diets built around thin soups, cottage cheese, coffee, cigarettes, and deprivation. The body that earned millions for the studio was not permitted to feed itself properly. Even joy was rationed. When the studio rolled out a giant birthday cake for a publicity stunt, Judy smiled for the cameras, blew out the candles, and gave the public a sweet little image of childhood celebration. Then the press left, and the cake was taken away. That detail says everything. It is not about the cake itself. It is about the totality of ownership. Even pleasure had to be orchestrated, staged, and removed. Judy Garland was not allowed to have spontaneous human experience. She was allowed only performative experience, the part that photographed well. The machine created the exhaustion, then it sold her the cure. The girl in the ruby slippers. By the time Judy Garland made The Wizard of Oz, she was only 16 years old. And even then, the studio was already at war with her body. The role demanded that she appear younger, smaller, more childlike, more innocent than biology would naturally allow. So the studio intervened physically. Restrictive undergarments were used to flatten and suppress her developing figure. Costumes became instruments of control. Her body was literally bound into the shape the corporation wanted the audience to believe in. All of this happened under unbearable physical conditions: hot lights, long hours, constant supervision, exhaustion, hunger, and the expectation of perfect emotional accessibility. Then came the performance. She walked under those lights and sang "Over the Rainbow" with a face full of innocence and longing, giving the world one of the most iconic musical performances in film history. The public saw hope, the camera saw perfection, the studio saw profit. What nobody saw, or what too many chose not to see, was the physical discomfort and engineered fragility underneath that image. The same voice that carried a generation was being housed in a teenager whose body had already begun to disappear under the demands of the system. Judy was not playing a child. She was being forced to remain one. That distinction is the whole damn story. Louis B. Mayer's office. There is the public mythology of Louis B. Mayer, the fatherly studio boss, the man who called his stars family, the architect of Golden Age glamour, the patriarch presiding over a kingdom of dreams. Then there is the darker version, the version whispered on the lot, the version buried for decades under power, fear, shame, and the very real threat of blacklisting. The version in which Judy Garland, a vulnerable teenager desperate for approval, was regularly summoned into the office of the man who controlled her career, her income, and the financial fate of her family. Years later, Judy broke her silence about those encounters. According to those later recollections, what happened in that office was not paternal guidance. It was violation disguised as mentorship. Career talks drifted into physical misconduct. Advice came wrapped in degradation. What should have been a protected professional relationship was transformed into something coercive and intimate in the ugliest possible way. And Judy could not scream. That is the point that has to be sat with. She could not scream because screaming would have meant risking everything. She could be called unstable, ungrateful, difficult, hysterical. She could lose her place. Her mother could lose her place. The family income could disappear. The machine could close around her. So she learned the same lesson abused children in powerful systems often learn. Dissociate, survive, stay quiet. She left her body in that office the same way she left it on the sound stage, by turning herself into a usable shell. That is not a side note in the story. That is the center of the cage. Every adult was a warden. The horror of Judy Garland's story is not just that abuse happened. It is that everyone around her knew enough to stop it and chose not to. The doctors knew she was being medicated beyond reason. The nurses handed her the pills. The wardrobe department knew she was in pain. The commissary knew she was starving. The directors knew she was exhausted. The executives knew she was trapped. And even her mother, Ethel Gum, did not function as a protector. That piece is brutal, but it matters, because a child can sometimes survive one predator if another adult steps in and says enough. Judy had no such intervention. Ethel, by this account, was on the payroll psychologically, if not literally, in every moment that mattered. Status, money, and proximity to power outweighed the imperative to protect her daughter's body and mind. When Judy said she was tired, she was not rescued. She was told to take another pill and get back to work. That is how total systems of exploitation function. They don't rely on one villain. They rely on an ecology. Everyone performs a function. The cruelty gets distributed so evenly that no individual feels fully responsible, but the child at the center feels every bit of it. Judy Garland did not have one captor. She was surrounded by them. The chemical red line. As the late 1930s gave way to the 1940s, Judy Garland's fame exploded. She became universally beloved. Her voice carried through the Depression and into wartime America like a national comfort object. Paired with Mickey Rooney in a string of hit musicals, she became one half of a major box office machine. But the pairing concealed a biological lie. Rooney had natural manic energy and a body that could survive the pace MGM demanded. Judy did not. The studio did not care. Mayer looked at Rooney's speed and decided Judy Garland had to match it, frame for frame, beat for beat, smile for smile. And because she could not do that naturally, the pharmacy escalated. Mild stimulants became stronger Benzedrine. Sleep aids became Seconal and phenobarbital. Coffee reinforced the highs. Sedatives crushed the body into artificial sleep. The doses got heavier because tolerance always wins. This was not medicine. It was industrial calibration. The doctors were not treating a patient. They were maintaining a machine for output. Judy's central nervous system was being run like a vehicle revving at catastrophic speed. Her biological debt was mounting every day, and the studio's only answer was to issue more chemicals and demand more work. The body always sends the bill eventually. MGM just made sure it arrived later. The soundstage as prison. A soundstage is not neutral space. It is windowless, airless, artificial. Once those giant doors close, time loses meaning. Sunlight disappears. Morning and night become irrelevant. The only clock that matters is the production schedule. For Judy Garland, the soundstage became not just a workplace, but an entire ecosystem of captivity. She entered before dawn. She emerged after dark. The only sun she knew was the heat from the lights. The only night she knew was the drug-induced blackout. This is where the split inside her hardened into habit. There was the real girl, exhausted, nauseated, hungry, panicked, trembling. And then there was Judy Garland for the lens, smiling, singing, sparkling, emotionally available on demand. That split is psychologically devastating. It teaches you that your pain is irrelevant unless it can be photographed beautifully. It teaches you that your inner reality has no social value. Only the performance matters. The machine did not want Francis Gumm's exhaustion. It wanted Judy Garland's smile. And so she learned to resurrect the smile on command, while the rest of her was quietly dying. Mayer's best weapon, guilt. Louis B. Mayer did not always control through rage. Sometimes he used something cheaper and far more effective, guilt. This is one of the most insidious parts of the story. When Judy, driven to collapse, begged for rest or a lighter schedule, Mayer could abandon the tyrant persona and perform the wounded patriarch. He cried. He spoke in trembling tones. He invoked the sacred mythology of the MGM family. He reminded her of all the workers whose lives supposedly depended on her finishing the picture. How could she be so selfish? How could she break his heart? How could she betray the studio that loved her? To a deeply insecure girl starved for fatherly approval, this tactic was devastating. The manipulator becomes the victim. The actual victim becomes the offender. Judy left those meetings feeling guilty for her own exhaustion, ashamed of her own biology, apologizing for the consequences of abuse. That is emotional blackmail at a master level. And it worked. Because guilt can keep a prisoner performing more efficiently than chains. The confiscation of a life. MGM did not just control Judy Garland's labor. It confiscated her adolescence, Her romantic life was managed for publicity. Approved dates were staged like miniature film productions, supervised and timed, photographed and distributed. Every aspect of youth that should have belonged to her naturally, experimentation, rebellion, first love, autonomy, was turned into managed content. When she tried to love outside the system retaliated. The relationship with Artie Shaw represented not just romance, but danger to the closed loop of control. He was independent. He was not owned by Mayer. He existed outside the perfectly managed ecosystem. So the studio interfered, obstructed, and poisoned the possibility. Later, marriage to David Rose offered the appearance of escape. But pregnancy revealed how little freedom she actually had. MGM did not see a baby. It saw a scheduling problem. Surrounded by fixers, pressure, and the merciless logic of the studio, Judy was pushed into abortion because the product line could not sustain a pregnant star with innocence still to sell. Then she was sent back to set. That sequence is one of the ugliest in the whole story. Her body underwent trauma. Her choice was erased. Her grief was ignored. And then she was told to perform joy. That is the emotional structure of Judy Garland's life inside MGM. Private devastation, public radiance. The body begins to fail. By the mid-1940s, the physical consequences could no longer be fully hidden. Her hands shook. Her sleep collapsed. Her weight fluctuated wildly. Her hair thinned. Her endocrine system, immunity, and nerves were fraying under decades of starvation and chemical control. MGM's response was not medical rescue. It was cosmetic concealment. Makeup got heavier. Wigs got thicker. Costumes were altered to hide deterioration. Sweat was absorbed into garments. Weakness was patched, powdered, and sent back under the lights. She was not being healed. She was being dressed. This is where the mythology of Judy Garland as difficult takes shape in your story. MGM had every incentive to manufacture that reputation. Once the body begins openly failing, the corporation shifts blame. It does not admit the system is broken. It leaks stories. It seeds gossip. It reframes the abused as unstable, spoiled, temperamental, ungrateful. They broke her legs and then mocked her for limping. That line, spiritually, is the whole damn thing. The panopticon. MGM was not merely a studio. It was a surveillance state. Judy Garland lived under constant observation. Makeup artists, wardrobe assistants, chauffeurs, nurses, script supervisors, ordinary-looking personnel became informants feeding information back to the front office. Every deviation, every weakness, every unapproved call, every conversation, every hint of rebellion was logged and assessed. That kind of constant watchfulness destroys a person's interior life. If you are always observed, you stop experiencing privacy as real. You stop trusting faces. You stop believing kindness is safe. Judy could not know if the smile in front of her belonged to a friend or a spy. That level of total monitoring breeds paranoia as a rational response. And the deprivation was equally total. She was not allowed food freely. She could not sit at industry dinners and eat like other adults. Handlers monitored what she consumed. Commissary staff enforced her starvation. Cigarettes were prescribed as appetite suppressants. She was a millionaire who could not buy herself a sandwich without permission. That is not glamour. That is institutional humiliation. And then came the corsets. Her body was literally bound into childlike shape for 18-hour days. The garments bruised her ribs, restricted her breathing, tore at her skin, and made singing itself a physical battle. The very thing the studio profited from, her voice, had to emerge through a body being mechanically crushed. If that ain't a prison, what the hell is? Meet me in St. Louis and the sound of drowning. Meet Me in St. Louis is remembered as warmth, nostalgia, family, tenderness, holiday comfort, American innocence in Technicolor. But in your version of this history, the film becomes a grotesque contradiction. Because while Judy sings, "Have yourself a merry little Christmas," what the audience hears as tender melancholy is, in part, the sound of a woman already drowning. She was addicted, depleted, depressed, isolated, and physically unraveling. The marriage to David Rose was collapsing. The studio system was tightening. Her body was failing in ways makeup could only partially hide. And yet the machine captured the pain beautifully. That is what makes the system monstrous. It does not waste genuine agony. It converts it into usable emotional product and sells it. Every tear, every fracture, every tremor gets translated through lenses and microphones into something profitable. The movie became a classic. The machine won again. And Judy moved one step closer to the abyss. Sungrown's executive order olive oil. One drizzle and the whole table listens. He ain't just running the pizzaverse, he's feeding it. Straight from the president's private stash comes Sungrown's executive order olive oil, cold-pressed, first cut, and slicker than a backroom deal in City Hall. Features: presidential grade, pressed from olives grown under 24/7 protection contracts. Flavor with power, makes any dish taste like a vote in your favor. Cabinet approved. Every capo in the room swears by it, or else. Frank Pecoraro. I dipped bread in it, and suddenly I was running a casino in Vegas. Admiral Impeach. Too smooth. I used it to grease submarine gears and salad greens. Worked perfect both ways. Lopez. Confiscated a bottle once. Had to return it. Couldn't stop cooking with it. Special offer. Order now, and Sungrown throws in a presidential breadstick pen. Sign laws, then dip them in the sauce. Sungrown's executive order olive oil. Taste the power, respect the office. The foreman, the breakdown, and the reboot. Marriage to Vincente Minnelli did not free Judy from the factory. It fused the factory to her private life. She married a director, not an outsider, not a rescuer, not a man outside the system, but one more functionary inside it. As your story frames it, she did not escape the machine. She married the foreman. Pregnancy with Liza temporarily interrupted the chemical cycle and exposed just how wrecked her body already was. Without the steady flood of amphetamines and sedatives, the nervous system crashed. Depression roared up. Fatigue became total. But the studio waited only until childbirth before shoving her back into production. Then came The Pirate. On that set, the machinery fully broke down. Amphetamines no longer produced energy. They produced psychosis, panic, paranoia, lock-ins. screaming spells, dressing room breakdowns. And still the set rolled on. Still the husband-director demanded takes. Still the studio measured the crisis in budget terms. That is where the language gets impossibly cruel. They docked her pay for days missed due to a collapse they had engineered. They charged her financially for the cost of her own destruction. Then came the suicide attempt. Then sanitariums. Then electroshock. That is the brutal system reboot in your narrative. The machine broke, so the machine was shocked, medicated, stabilized just enough to sing again, and thrown back under the lights. Easter Parade became proof to Mayer that the process worked. The box office said yes, so the abuse escalated again. Full depreciation. By the time Judy hit Annie Get Your Gun, the asset was done. Her hair was falling out. Her body was skeletal. Her voice was frayed. Her mind was in daily panic. She locked herself in dressing rooms and screamed in terror. At this point, Louis B. Mayer stopped performing fatherhood. No more tears. No more family mythology. No more wounded patriarch act. The ledger had the answer. The maintenance cost now exceeded the projected return. And that is when the corporation revealed its truest face. It suspended her, cut the salary, denied access, closed the gates, eventually terminated the contract altogether. After 15 years of extracting wealth from her body and voice, MGM threw her out at 27 years old, addicted, suicidal, physically destroyed, financially chaotic, and emotionally unequipped for adult life outside institutional control. That is the corporate eviction at the heart of the story. They didn't just fire her. They unplugged the system they had built around her and dumped the damaged machinery on the curb. The gates close, the prison remains. Leaving MGM did not mean freedom. It meant exposure. Because by then the legal contract had ended, but the biological and psychological contracts remained written into her blood and nervous system. She still needed the uppers. She still needed the downers. She still carried Mayer's voice in her head. She still saw herself as ugly, defective, worthless without applause. That is the real evil of long-term conditioning. The abuser can disappear physically and still live inside the victim forever. Now cut loose from the studio pharmacy, Judy had to chase equilibrium through private doctors, black market access, and increasingly unstable circles. Financial ruin piled on top of chemical dependency. Public humiliation piled on top of private collapse. Then came the bathroom and the shattered glass. The attempt to cut her throat reads in your telling like something more than despair. It reads like a symbolic assault on the very instrument that had enslaved her. The voice everyone owned, the voice the machine sold, the voice she herself could never fully reclaim. She survived. Hollywood did not respond with compassion. It responded with containment and disgust. A star is born again. If there is one final great cruelty in Judy Garland's story, it is that even her comeback became another extraction event. A Star is Born gave her the chance to turn trauma into art on a scale so raw and visible, it terrified the people filming her. She was no longer simply acting. She was bleeding through the performance. Every humiliation, every abandonment, every broken promise in her life lived under the skin of that role. The film was a triumph. The comeback narrative was perfect. The woman discarded by MGM had returned with the greatest work of her career. She was nominated for the Oscar. Cameras were installed in her hospital room because everyone expected the final act of redemption. The industry was ready to photograph its own forgiveness. Then she lost. And the camera crew packed up and walked out. That image is the whole business in miniature. Set up the lights. Extract the moment. Pull the plug the second the winner changes. Judy sat there with all the old conditioning screaming back to life. Not enough, never enough. After that, there would be no true cinematic resurrection. Only touring. Debt. IRS harassment. Addiction. Hostility. Cheap venues. Bad rooms. Broken dignity. And still she kept performing because she had been taught since childhood that performance was the only acceptable form of existence. London. By the late 1960s, the collapse was nearly complete. Judy Garland was physically broken, emotionally isolated, financially unstable, chemically dependent, and still trying to work. She bounced between hotels, nightclubs, and increasingly humiliating circumstances. Mickey Deans entered her life not as salvation, but as another handler of supply, another man orbiting the residual value of a dying star. The wedding in London is one of the most devastating images in your story. She invited hundreds. Almost nobody came. The hall sat empty. That is the final revelation of abandonment. The industry, the peers, the institutions, the people who had feasted on her talent, gone. She had stopped being profitable in the old way, so she had stopped being real to them. Then came the rented Muse house. Cadogan Lane. Belgravia. No glamour left. Only physical failure and the old conditioning still driving her toward one more booking, one more performance, one more attempt to justify her existence. By then, Louis B. Mayer was long dead. But his ghost was alive in every ritual of self-hatred, every pill taken for sleep, every fear of weight, every anxiety that rest had to be earned, every conviction that she was useful only if she could still sing. That is the true horror ending. The system no longer required physical walls. It had already built itself inside her. The quiet failure of the body. In June 1969, Judy Garland's body finally gave up. Not dramatically in public, not under studio lights, quietly, clinically, in a London bathroom. After 3 decades of chemical acceleration, malnutrition, organ stress, sleep destruction, emotional trauma, and pharmaceutical dependency, her respiratory system simply shut down under the weight of barbiturate sedation. That is what makes the ending so brutal. It was not a sudden mystery. It was an engineered conclusion. The damage had been compounding for years. The liver was failing. The heart was weakened. The brainstem could not tolerate the flood forever. The body that MGM had driven past every natural limit finally exercised the only power it had left. It stopped. Then came the mourning. The same industry that had helped build the machine attended the funeral, issued praise, and wrapped itself in grief while omitting the central truth of its own role. The public got tributes. The legend got flowers. The myth held. But the myth was built over the corpse of Francis Gum. And that is the part history keeps trying to pretty up. Dorothy lives, Francis dies. After Judy Garland died, the machine kept working. That is maybe the ugliest truth of all. The image survives. Dorothy survives. The ruby slippers survive. The songs survive. The fantasy survives. The corporation liquidates memorabilia, monetizes nostalgia, sells the icon forever. But Francis Gum. Francis was consumed. And the tragedy of Mommy Dearest-style public caricature never really attaches here in the same way. Judy Garland's public memory stayed warmer, sadder, more romantic, which can be its own form of distortion. Because romance softens systems. Romance makes exploitation look like tragic destiny instead of organized abuse. Your version does not let that happen. It forces the audience to look at Judy Garland not as a fragile little casualty of fame, but as someone raised inside a machine of total corporate domination. A child who was over-medicated, underfed, humiliated, controlled, surveilled, and psychologically broken for profit. That is not vague pressure. That is industrial harm. Judy Garland's story is not just about Hollywood excess. It is about what happens when a child enters a corporate system that values product over person, output over health, illusion over reality, and profit over every human limit. MGM did not merely manage Judy Garland. It engineered her dependency. It starved her, accelerated her, restrained her, violated her, guilted her, monitored her, and blamed her for the exact damage it caused. Then, when she could no longer carry the financial burden of being Judy Garland, it discarded her. But the system's deepest cruelty is this. It taught her to keep discarding herself long after it was gone. That is why the story still hits like a knife. Because the woman on the screen, singing about somewhere over the rainbow, was not just a performer. She was a captive being photographed beautifully. And behind every ounce of magic the audience adored was a body paying for it in blood chemistry, nerves, fear, hunger, and silence. Judy Garland did not simply burn out. She was used up. This has been Judy Garland, Hollywood, MGM, and the child they consumed. A Pizzaverse Studios documentary. A Palermo Productions original. Written by Bambi Palermo. Narrated by Vincent DiPrio. If you want more deep dives into the machinery behind old Hollywood, the power, the abuse, the lies, the glitter painted over suffering, stay locked in with the Pizzaverse. Because around here, we don't just watch the dream. We ask who got crushed building it. Thank you for watching. Thank you for supporting the channel. And thank you for riding with the Pizzaverse. For every child turned into product, every star sold as fantasy, and every truth buried under studio lights, there is still value in dragging the reality back into the open. And in this house, we don't bow to the myth. Judy Garland, Francis Gum, this is the girl they built and broke. From fresh-faced Dorothy to worn-down Survivor, you can literally watch the system take its toll across these photos. Louis B. Mayer, MGM studio head. This guy ran MGM like it was his personal kingdom. Public image, loving father figure, behind closed doors. Different story depending on who you ask. Ethel Gum, Judy's mother. Not a footnote. She was part of the system around Judy, and that's where it gets uncomfortable. No hero here. Vincent Minnelli, director, husband. Brilliant director. No question. But in this story, he ain't the savior. He's still inside the machine. Mickey Rooney, co-star, MGM partner. The energy benchmark. The guy Judy was chemically pushed to keep up with. Whole system revolved around output. Liza Minnelli, daughter. The next generation, same world, different outcome. Mickey Dean's final husband, end of the line. By this point, it ain't Hollywood anymore. It's survival. MGM Studios, the machine itself. Don't forget this. This was the main character. Not a building. A system.
I was reading a quote recently, and you said, I wish people would stop talking about my comebacks and my unhappiness. I have had so many happier days. I have so many happy days now. Do you recall saying this? It was just in the paper recently.
Well, that's true, you know. I've had, maybe it will distress a lot of people, but I've had an awfully nice life. I really have had.
I think it will surprise a lot of people who kind of like to think of you as a...
Tragedy.
You know, the poor little rich girl.
Never rich,
well,
just
not that,
poor.
but, you know, in the same
and
time.
sad.
And the woman who had everything and yet, you know, wasn't happy. What are the things that bring you I don't even have to ask you. I was going to say, what are the things that bring you so much happiness today? And you're hugging one of them right now.
Well, first of all, my two friends here, myself, my oldest daughter, my son-in-law, my future, my past, my present, and my audiences. And that ain't bad.
No, it's not bad. And I count myself among those of your audience who love you so much, so I'm doing this interview with great joy for me.
Thank you, Barbara.
Looking forward to being a grandmother? That's going to happen one of these days.
Can't wait.
Really?
I can't wait. I want her to have a baby immediately, and then she can see the baby for only 25 minutes, and I'll be a babysitter. I love it.
If you hadn't been an actress, if you can imagine being anything else but an actress, what do you think you might have wanted to be?
Happily married, and just a nice lady.
Do you think it's possible to be an actress and be happily married?
Well, I don't think anybody who married me thought so, but I think it's possible. I don't see any reason, but I think it's probably a little difficult. It seems that every man I've ever met, they sort of, well, they know that I'm Judy Garland when they start to go with me, and then the minute they sort of get entangled with me, they say, you know how difficult it is to be. Well, why didn't they think of that before they, you know, took me out the first time? I don't know. I don't think I'm that difficult to you. It doesn't seem, it hasn't been too rough on. No. But at any rate, I would like that. I'm a good cook, by the way, and I think you can vouch for that. Say something.
Yes.
No fair.
She makes the best shepherd's pie.
Shepherd's pie, they like, yes.
That's a pretty good recommendation. Do you want to get married again?
You're talking to Joe?
I'm talking to you. Joe hasn't been married yet.
He got the bridal bouquet at the wedding
Yes,
twice.
he did.
But do you think you do? Is it something that's...
I don't want to rush into it, no. I think I was married the first time when I was 6 months old, it seems to me. No, I'm not anxious to get married again. I don't see any necessity for that, unless you got somebody in mind.
Gee, I don't know. You seem awfully nice. I'm going to look around. Do you enjoy being recognized? I'm sure there's hardly a place you can go to where you're not.
I don't like it too much. I wouldn't, it's just that sometimes a lack of privacy. It's hard to just grow up in the public and I'm a terrible eavesdropper. I love to eavesdrop and peek through keyholes, and I've never peeked through one keyhole without finding somebody looking back at me. It's terrible.
What are you the least tolerant of these days?
The least tolerant, I'm the least tolerant of any more lies or foolishness in print or spoken about me.
In a world where lies spread faster than Wi-Fi, where screenshots are cropped, stories are twisted, and everybody's suddenly an expert, one man said, "Nah, I ain't buying it." Introducing the Exposer, the only device powerful enough to detect lies before they even finish typing. Watch as the Exposer scans suspicious posts, fake personas, e trust me bro stories, feature breakdown, with patented technology like bullshit radar, automatically detects exaggeration, fake flexing, emotional manipulation. Warning, cap detected. Narrative breaker. Cuts through half-truths. Deflection, der Radio Warshurpor Naturebitscherin. Harinor, playing the victim energy. Nice try, but we see you. Receipt recovery mode. Finds old posts. Concerning contradictions. Deleted comments. Even the ones they thought were gone. And now, expose mode. With one click, boom. The truth gets dropped. Publicly. Side effects may include sudden silence, panic deleting, "You're obsessed with me" responses, and full-blown internet meltdowns. Bonus feature. Order now and get accountability upgrade free. Because around here, we don't just talk. We back it up. The Exposer. If it smells funny, it probably is. Available now on YouTube, Sati, comment section. And that one friend who always notices everything?
How'd that cross necklace get over your horns? You know the saying, I bet you be sweating like a whore in church, spending too much time, try to hide behind the Bible. Get in front of it, find out that Jesus was a foreigner. Virgin Mary, you would've deported her. Not before your husband found out she was a minor, he'd have ordered her. Him and his buddies would've recorded her, transported her, extorted her, and then sent her to the coroner. You don't get to pray for me. You won't bless your heart out of this one. I know that your hate runs deep. God is probably tired of getting name dropped by fake Christians. You don't get to pray for me. You won't bless your heart out of this one. I know that your hate runs deep. God is probably tired of getting name dropped by fake Christians. I'm pretty sure that God's annoyed of racists bringing him up. Sick of you chumps showing up to take a sip of the cup. You called the Aztec savages, but the cup, isn't it blood? Isn't the stuff symbolic? Oh, it's different, huh? Introduction to blood sacrifice. He died so you can commit your crimes. Here's the hoping he come back to life. I can't wait to see the face on every single preacher's wife. All them secrets you've been keeping, tell me how you sleep at night. All them evil things you feeling, don't leave cause you be polite. Cause this even and the thieving ain't concealed as recondite. Only a few people know. And you know why they keep it tight. You don't get to pray for me. You won't bless your heart out of this one. I know that your hate runs deep. God is probably tired of getting name dropped by fake Christians. You don't get to pray for me. You won't bless your heart out of this one. I know that your hate runs deep. God is probably tired of getting name dropped by fake Christians. Weaponized all of it, don't know what a proverb is. Cherry picking Bible scripts, oh my God. Arrogance, lying in the Lord names ain't honoring. Pride leading the blind again, oh my God. You must be drunk off the blood of Christ. Or maybe you just back hitting the hooch again. Or back to cosplaying a hooligan. The grift, the cross, to get the dollars like what? Now you forgot where you and your hoochie been? You don't get to pray for me. You won't bless your heart out of this one. I know that your hate runs deep. God is probably tired of getting name dropped by fake Christians. You don't get to pray for me. You won't bless your heart out of this one. I know that your hate runs deep. God is probably tired of getting name dropped by fake Christians.